My name is Simone Vance, and I am 31 years old. For 6 years, I was the one they called, every time, not to say thank you, to say how much. The last time was a Wednesday in March. My cousin Priya's car had thrown a rod somewhere on I-40 outside Albuquerque. She called at 11:14 p.m. I was already in my pajamas, already tired, already 3 hours deep into a spreadsheet I needed finished by morning. I wired $1,200 before midnight. I told her to get a hotel. I told her she could pay me back whenever. She has not paid me back. That was 14 months ago, but that is not the story. The story is what I heard 6 weeks later at my Aunt Patricia's birthday dinner, when they forgot I had not yet come in from the garage. I had gone to get the extra folding chairs. I was standing just outside the kitchen door when my cousin Marcus said it. Simone's not going to say no. She never says no. She's basically our ATM. The room laughed. My mother laughed. My aunt laughed. Priya, the one I had wired $1,200 to 14 months ago, laughed the loudest. I stood in the garage with 2 folding chairs in my hands, and I did not move. I counted the floor tiles. 12 across, 9 down. I waited until my face was ready. Then I walked inside and set up the chairs and ate the birthday cake and smiled. But something had closed inside me the way a lock turns. Quietly, finally. Welcome to her silent triumph, where women who have been used for their generosity discover that the quietest power move is the one nobody sees coming. This is a story about what happens when the person who always says yes finally reads the fine print on her own life. If you have ever been the one they called when they needed something, and the last one they thought of when they needed nothing at all, drop a comment below and subscribe. You are exactly where you belong. Let me tell you who I was in this family. Not who they thought I was, who I actually was. I grew up in Tucson, the eldest daughter of Renee Vance, née Holloway. My father left when I was 4. My mother worked 2 jobs through most of my childhood. She was good at working, good at surviving, not always good at the other things. We were close in the way people get close when there is nobody else, which is a kind of closeness that can look like love and sometimes is not. By the time I was 22, I had a bachelor's degree in accounting from the University of Arizona, a job at a regional audit firm in Phoenix, and a habit I had not yet recognized as one. The habit was this. When a family member had a problem, I solved it. When they had a gap, I filled it. When they had a number they needed to make, I was the number. It started small, $200 here. A month of my cousin's car insurance there. It was never spoken as a loan, exactly. It was spoken as family, which is a word that covers a great deal of ground if you let it. By the time I was 26, I had been promoted twice. I was earning $78,000 a year. I had a savings account I was proud of and a growing set of competencies in trust and estate law that I handled on the audit side of the firm. I understood documents. I understood structures. I understood exactly what it meant when a piece of paper said one thing and a family relationship implied another. What I did not yet understand was that I was living inside a document I had never read. The calls came in a rhythm I did not recognize as a rhythm until later. My Aunt Patricia's roof in June, $1,400. My mother's car transmission in September, $2,000. My cousin Marcus's eviction notice in November, $1,100 for the first month and the security deposit. Priya's phone bill, her power bill, her deposit on an apartment she was excited about and stayed in for 7 months. My younger brother Devin's DUI fine, which cost $1,800, and which he told me had traumatized him deeply, and which he paid back in the amount of $0. I kept a notebook, not to pressure anyone. I kept it the way I kept everything at work, because numbers are real and real things deserve to be recorded. Over 6 years, the notebook said $34,700. $34,700. Given, not lent. Given because the asking was always so wrapped in crisis and love and family that saying anything else felt like saying no to the people who were supposed to be the floor under my feet. I told myself I didn't need it back. I told myself I was lucky to have it to give. I told myself this was what family was. Then I stood in a garage, and listened to them laugh about me, and I understood that I had been reading the wrong document. Here is what I did not do after that dinner. I did not confront anyone. I did not send a group text. I did not cry in my car, though I would have been entitled to. I drove home at 10:15 p.m. and I sat at my kitchen table and I opened the notebook. $34,700. I read every entry, the dates, the amounts, the names, the reasons, which were always urgent and always real, and which I had always, without exception, accepted as sufficient. Then I did what accountants do. I looked for the pattern. The pattern was not hard to find. The calls always came to me first, not to each other, to me. Marcus had never wired Priya her security deposit. Priya had never loaned Devon money for his fine. My mother had never called Patricia when her car broke down. They called each other for birthdays and holidays and gossip. They called me for money. I was not family to them. I was infrastructure. The second thing I noticed was this. Not one of them had ever asked how I was doing. Not on a Tuesday, not in a parking lot, not in a text that wasn't prefacing a number. In 6 years, in $34,000 of family, not one of them had sent a message that simply said, "How are you?" I closed the notebook. I made tea. I did not sleep for a long time. By morning, I had made a decision that was not a decision so much as a recognition. The relationship I had been in with my family was a contract. It had terms. The terms were that I gave and they received, and everyone pretended this was love. I had signed that contract in pencil, which means I could rewrite it in ink. But I needed to know what I was working with first. There is a woman at my firm named Claudette. She is 53, a senior partner, and she has the particular stillness of someone who has been underestimated so many times that underestimation has become a tactical advantage. She once told me that the most useful thing she ever learned in 30 years of accounting was to know exactly what you own before you let anyone tell you otherwise. I knocked on her office door on a Thursday morning and I told her what I had, not the emotion of it, the numbers. She listened. She did not say "I'm sorry" or "that's terrible" or any of the things people say when they don't know what to do with a difficult truth. She said, "How much of that is documented?" All of it, bank transfers, wire confirmations, I had every one. "Good," she said. "Now, what do you actually want?" I thought about that for a moment. What I wanted was not the money back. What I wanted was what I had not had in 6 years. To be seen as a person, not a resource. To be inside the family rather than beneath it. To matter in the way that had nothing to do with my bank account. What I wanted, I realized, was to stop being the ATM. Claudette nodded. She handed me the card of a woman she knew. Estate and family law, a small practice in Scottsdale. Her name was Rachel Ose. "Before you do anything else," Claudette said, "talk to Rachel. Not because you're going to sue your family, because you need to know what your options are before anyone else does." Rachel Osei's office had a rubber plant in the corner that had clearly been thriving for 20 years, and a framed cross-stitch on the wall that read * clarity before action. I liked her immediately. I laid out the notebook. I laid out the transfer records. I told her about the garage and the chairs and the word ATM. Rachel read through the documents without speaking. Then she set them down. "You're not here about the money," she said. It was not a question. "Not exactly. You want leverage. I want a boundary that holds." She nodded slowly. "Those are different things." Then she told me something I had not expected. Under Arizona law, she said, informal financial arrangements within families, transfers made without explicit loan documentation, are presumed gifts. I had known this, theoretically. What I had not understood was what it meant in reverse. It meant I had been giving gifts. $34,700 in gifts, which meant I was also free to stop giving them at any time, for any reason, without obligation, without explanation, and without anyone having a legal claim on my future. "They have no standing," Rachel said. "None of them, not for what's already gone and certainly not for anything going forward." She paused. "The question is, how do you want to announce that you've closed the account?" I looked at the rubber plant. 20 years in that corner, thriving. I want them to understand, I said. All of them at once, and I want it to be quiet. Rachel smiled. Those two things are not incompatible. The opportunity arrived 6 weeks later. My mother called on a Sunday afternoon. Her voice had that specific texture, warm, preliminary, building towards something. She talked about the weather for 90 seconds. She talked about Devon's new job for 45. Then she said, "Patricia's thinking about doing a family dinner for everyone. She wants to do it properly this time at her house, and she asked if you'd be willing to help cover the catering." I had not been asked to attend. I had been asked to fund attendance. "How much is the catering?" I asked. She got a quote for around 800. For 20 people, that's really reasonable. I said, "Tell Patricia I'll be there, and tell her I can't help with the catering this time." A pause, long enough to be significant. "Oh, are things?" "Things are fine. I just can't do it this time." Another pause. "Of course, sweetheart, of course, we'll figure it out." She did not ask how I was. We hung up. I sat with the phone in my hand for a moment, and I felt something I had not felt in 6 years, like a window had opened. Small, just a crack, but open. The family dinner was on a Saturday in May. I drove to Patricia's house with 2 things. A casserole dish I had actually cooked myself, because showing up with food was one of the languages I knew, and a small envelope I had prepared with Rachel's guidance. The envelope contained a single piece of paper. It was not a legal document. It was not a demand letter. It was something quieter and more permanent than either. It was a personal financial statement of my giving over 6 years. $34,700. Each entry dated, each amount listed, each name beside it. Not formatted as a bill, not formatted as a demand. Formatted like a ledger, which is what it was. At the bottom, in my own handwriting, "This account is now closed. I love you all. Simone." Patricia's house smelled like the lemon cake she always made and the specific air of a room full of people who were slightly louder than they needed to be. I set the casserole on the counter. I hugged my aunt. I said hello to Marcus, who said Simone, in the tone of someone genuinely happy to see an ATM. I sat down next to Priya, who was telling a story about a trip she was planning to Miami. I waited. My mother made a small speech at the beginning of dinner. Patricia. And then Marcus stood up and said he had a small announcement. He'd got himself into a bind, and he wanted to ask the family if anyone could help him bridge a gap before the end of the month. He was looking at the table, and then he looked at me. I looked back at him. "I can't this time, Marcus," I said. My voice was level, normal dinner volume. The table went quiet the way tables go quiet when someone says something that doesn't fit the script. "Oh," Marcus said. "I mean, it's just a short-term thing, Simone, 200, 300 at most." "I know, I can't this time." He looked at our aunt. Our aunt looked at my mother. My mother looked at her hands. I reached into my bag. I took out the envelope and I placed it in the center of the table, between the casserole and the lemon cake, where everyone could see it. "I put something together," I said. "I think it'll explain it better than I can." Nobody moved for a moment. Then Patricia picked it up. She opened it. She read the first line. I watched her face change. She passed it to my mother without speaking. My mother read it. Her hand went still on the table. She passed it to Marcus. Marcus read it. The color left his face by degrees, the way light leaves a room at the end of the day. Priya read it last. She set it down in front of her and looked at me for the first time that evening, as if she were actually seeing me. "Simone," she started. "I'm not angry," I said. "I want you all to know that this isn't anger." I kept my voice the same, dinner table volume. A woman saying something she has thought about carefully. "I've been glad to help when I could. I was glad every time. But I realized a few months ago that I had become something to this family that I didn't agree to become, and nobody asked me about it. The notebook is 6 years long. I thought you should all know what 6 years looks like." Silence. My mother said very quietly, "Simone, we had no idea." That it added up, or that I was keeping track. She didn't answer. "Both are real things," I said. "I kept track because numbers are real. I kept track because I needed to be able to see it for myself. I folded my hands on the table. I'm not closing any doors. I'm not leaving this family. I'm changing the terms. The new terms are, I'm your family, not your bank. If I help someone, it'll be because I chose to, not because not helping is unthinkable. The lemon cake sat in the center of the table. Nobody had touched it yet. Marcus said, I didn't realize, and stopped, started again. I didn't think of it that way. I know, I said. That's partly why I wanted to say it out loud. What happened after is not a fairy tale. I want to be honest about that. My Aunt Patricia cried, which I had not anticipated. Not performatively, genuinely, the way people cry when they recognize something true about themselves that they have been avoiding. She told me she had known, somewhere, that the calls always went to me. She said she had told herself it was because I was reliable, which was true, but that reliable was not the same as inexhaustible, and she should have understood the difference. My mother did not say much that evening. She took a piece of cake and she sat very still for a long time. A week later, she called me on a Tuesday, not about money, and asked if I wanted to have lunch. We had lunch, she paid. Marcus apologized eventually, 3 weeks later, in a text that was genuine if slightly clumsy. He never repaid the $1,100. I did not expect him to. That wasn't the point. Priya sent me a message on a Thursday evening, unprompted. It said, I've been thinking about the garage for a long time. I'm sorry you heard that. I did not know she knew I had heard. I wrote back, thank you. That means something, and it did. Devin, my brother, never addressed it directly. He is 26 and still becoming someone. I have decided to let him finish becoming that person before I decide what I think about it. The catering for the birthday dinner came in at $680, funded by 5 different people chipping in without being asked, because when there is no ATM, people find other ways. It was fine. The food was fine. The party was fine. And I sat at that table as a person this time, not a service. There is a version of this story where I am bitter, where the $34,700 sits in me like gravel, where I replay every transaction and tally the interest and see only what was taken. I have visited that version. I did not stay. What I kept instead was the notebook, not as a record of debt, as a record of who I had been for 6 years. I had been someone who showed up, someone who solved things, someone who filled gaps at 11 o'clock on a Wednesday when a car died on I-40. That was not nothing. That was not a weakness that was exploited. That was a person with capacity and love who was not yet reading the fine print on how she was spending both. The fine print was this: capacity is not infinite. Love does not require self-erasure. And family is a two-way document, or it is not a document at all. Rachel Ose sent me a note after the dinner. It said, clarity before action, you did it right. I put it in the notebook at the back, behind the last entry. The last entry is blank. The quietest accounts are the ones nobody talks about until you close them. And the person who always said yes can only be underestimated for so long. That's my story. One notebook, one envelope, and a seat at the table that finally felt like mine. If you have been the one they called only when they needed something, share this with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment below. Hit subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.